Richard had never thought much about trust. For him, it was like air, invisible, always there, until one day it wasn't. He was 53, an engineer by trade, a man of structure and quiet logic. His world was measured: the click of a keyboard, the hum of a coffee machine, the predictable rhythm of a marriage that had lasted 26 years. But lately, the rhythm had changed. Clara, his wife, had started to live as if there were two worlds, one that included him and another that didn't. She smiled differently when her phone lit up. She answered quickly, then turned the screen away. She started dressing with more care, using perfume she hadn't touched in years. At first, Richard told himself he was imagining things. People change. Routines shift. Maybe she was simply trying to feel younger. But suspicion, once born, grows like rust, slow, silent, irreversible. One night, he noticed she hadn't returned home until after midnight. She said she'd been at a friend's birthday party. He smiled, said nothing, but that night he couldn't sleep. Her laughter in the hallway had sounded too light, too free. Over the next weeks, Richard began to notice details that didn't fit the pattern. 2 wine glasses left out, though he never drank. The faint smell of cologne in the living room, not his own. A shirt button on the floor, not from anything he owned. He started checking things. Not obsessively, but with precision, like testing a hypothesis. He memorized where she left her bag, the exact position of her shoes, the time she left and returned. Data. Evidence. He was an engineer, after all. He trusted facts more than feelings. One evening, Clara left her phone charging in the kitchen while she showered. Richard looked at it, not touching, just looking, and saw a message appear on the lock screen. The words were simple: "Can't stop thinking about last night." The sender's name was saved only as a letter, M. He didn't unlock the phone. He didn't need to. In that instant, something inside him went still. The kind of stillness that isn't calm but frozen, like a winter pond before it cracks. Later that night, he sat alone in the living room. The clock ticked softly, the fridge hummed, the world went on. Clara slept in their bed upstairs. And Richard thought, not about love, not about betrayal, but about observation. If she had her secret, he would have his. He opened his laptop and began searching for something he'd only read about in passing: hidden cameras. Small, discreet, easy to install. He read reviews, compared models, checked how they connected to a local network. It was almost comforting, the logic of it. Within a week, small lenses appeared around the house. One inside a smoke detector. One behind the bookshelf. Another facing the living room couch. Invisible eyes that never blinked. Richard didn't tell himself it was revenge. Not yet. He called it clarity. He needed to know. He needed the truth, captured not in words or suspicions, but in pixels, cold, clear, undeniable. The last camera he installed faced the hallway mirror, where Clara often paused to fix her hair before leaving. As he adjusted the angle, he saw his reflection, a man who looked more like a stranger than a husband. For a moment, he wondered what had gone wrong, and when. But then he tightened the screw, stepped back, and said quietly to himself, "Let's see what you're hiding." And for the first time in months, Richard felt something close to peace. For days, Richard avoided opening the camera footage. He told himself he didn't need to see it, that the act of watching would make him complicit in something he wasn't ready to face. But curiosity isn't logical. It gnaws at reason like water against stone. It was a Thursday night when he finally sat down in front of his computer. The room was dark except for the glow of the monitor. He opened the folder marked Security Logs. His hand hovered over the mouse for a moment before he clicked. The first videos were ordinary. Clara making coffee, tidying the living room, watering plants. The mundane comfort of a shared life. And then, on the third file, the rhythm changed. A sound. Laughter. Not hers alone. A second voice, lower, younger, confident. The camera behind the bookshelf caught it. Two figures entering the room. One familiar. One not. Richard didn't move. He watched in silence as Clara walked through the frame with a man he had never seen before. They spoke softly, their bodies close, the gestures unmistakably intimate, though he didn't need to see more to understand what it meant. He didn't shout. Didn't cry. Didn't close the laptop. He simply watched. When the screen finally went black, Richard sat motionless. His breathing was steady, his pulse normal. Inside, however, something had shifted. The foundation of 26 years cracked in a single, soundless moment. He stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured himself a glass of water. His reflection in the window looked pale, almost translucent. He whispered to it,
"So it's true."
There was no rage, not yet. Only clarity, the kind that comes when pain burns away every illusion. For the next few days, he lived like an observer inside his own life. He watched Clara move through their home, smiling, cooking, pretending nothing had changed. But for him, everything had. He began collecting the recordings, saving them on an external drive. Each labeled by date and time, precise, almost clinical. He thought of deleting them, then didn't. He told himself it was for closure, but part of him knew it was for something else. Late one night, he found himself rewatching one clip. The young man said something, too quiet to catch. Clara laughed again, that same light, careless laugh. And in that sound, Richard realized something terrible. He didn't hate them. He envied them. The freedom, the youth, the emotion he'd buried under years of stability. That realization scared him more than the betrayal itself. By the end of the week, Richard stopped pretending. He no longer saw Clara as his wife. She was a character now, part of a story he hadn't chosen but was forced to direct. And somewhere between anger and fascination, an idea began to form. He didn't want to destroy her. He wanted her to see herself, the way the world would, stripped of secrecy, stripped of safety. He wanted to expose the truth not to her, but through her. And as that thought solidified, Richard felt something almost like purpose. He opened a new folder on his computer. He named it The Project. By the following week, Richard's evenings had become ritualistic. He would finish dinner with Clara, exchange a few routine words, then retreat to his study under the pretense of work. Behind the closed door, the world narrowed to the blue glow of his monitor, a quiet theater of betrayal unfolding on his own screen. The cameras had captured everything. Not scandal, not passion, but the strange normality of deceit. The way Clara moved through the house as if it were hers alone now. The way she checked her reflection before opening the door. The way she smiled at the young man before he even stepped inside. Richard learned to watch without blinking. Each gesture, each pause became a data point, something to categorize and label. The engineer in him took control, while the husband quietly dissolved. The young man, maybe 28, lean, casually confident, had the posture of someone who'd never feared consequence. Richard found that detail fascinating. He zoomed in on the man's face once, studying his expression. There was no malice there. Just the easy arrogance of youth, that belief that life bends around desire. The first time they appeared together, Richard simply watched. The second time, he began recording highlights, short clips, moments that defined their rhythm. The way she touched her hair when nervous. The way he leaned too close when speaking. It wasn't about exposure yet, it was about understanding. But by the third recording, understanding turned into something colder. Richard started editing. He opened his video software, adjusted lighting, cut silent moments, synchronized angles from different cameras. Each frame, he treated like evidence, clean, efficient, almost artistic. He added no sound, no words, no context. Just images, movements, silence. In that silence, he felt control returning. For years, emotions had been unpredictable, messy. But now, here, every second obeyed him. He could pause time, rewind it, dissect it. He was the observer, the editor, the creator. Clara's laughter, once something that warmed the house, now made him analyze tone and duration. He measured it against the laughter she used with him, quieter, restrained. The difference was like light seen through dirty glass. The nights grew longer. His eyes ached from staring at the monitor, yet he couldn't look away. It was no longer pain. It was study, the kind scientists devote to their subjects. Sometimes, he caught himself whispering notes aloud.
Tuesday, 8:47 p.m. She waits by the window, nervous, anticipating.
He even began predicting moments before they happened. Like a chess player studying patterns of defeat. But the strange part was how peaceful he felt doing it. There was no shouting, no breaking things, no confrontation. Just quiet work, the hum of the computer fan, and the soft click of his mouse. Revenge didn't come as rage, it arrived as precision. Outside the study, the house carried on pretending. Clara's routine remained unchanged. She still asked if he'd eaten, still kissed his cheek goodnight. And Richard, ever the actor, smiled in return. He noticed small details he'd missed before, the way she avoided eye contact when lying, how she checked her phone during breakfast, how she hummed when she thought he wasn't listening. Every gesture, every sound became part of the archive. By midweek, he created a new folder inside the project. He called it Selections. Inside, he placed 10 carefully edited clips. Each one was under a minute, silent, framed perfectly. They looked almost cinematic, as if taken from an art film about loneliness and deceit. He didn't upload them yet. He just watched them play in sequence, his private film. He told himself this was documentation, not revenge. But deep down, he knew that was a lie. One evening, after Clara left again, he sat in the living room with the lights off. The faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. From where he sat, he could see the hallway, the one he'd seen countless times through his own cameras. When the clock struck midnight, headlights washed briefly across the window. A car door closed. Footsteps approached. Clara entered quietly, tiptoeing like a thief in her own home. Richard didn't move. He watched from the dark, unseen. For the first time, he felt detached from his own life, like a ghost watching the living. Later that night, he went back to his study and played the footage from the hidden camera above the hallway mirror. There she was, exactly as he'd just seen her, sneaking past her own reflection. He paused the frame right as her face turned toward the mirror. Her expression was calm, unaware. But behind her reflection, in the faint background light, Richard's own face appeared for a split second, a ghostly silhouette caught in the glass. He stared at that still image for a long time. Two people in one frame, the betrayer and the betrayed. Both blind to each other's truth. And then, for reasons he couldn't explain, Richard smiled. Not from joy, not from victory, but from realization. He understood now. This was no longer about watching. It was about showing. And before shutting down his computer that night, he opened one last folder. He named it Distribution. The first upload was almost an accident. It was late, past midnight, and Richard had been staring at the screen for hours. The folder Distribution sat open, empty except for one file. A short clip, 42 seconds long. He clicked on it, watched it once more. The lighting was perfect, cold, bluish, with a strange melancholy. Two figures in the frame, distant from the camera, their faces never fully visible. If you didn't know the context, it looked almost artistic. He told himself that was the point. Richard opened an anonymous browser window and began searching. The internet, as he quickly learned, had entire ecosystems for this kind of material. Blurred, anonymized, tagged under vague titles like Caught on Camera or Secret Moments. He clicked through pages of content, expressionless. None of it shocked him. Humanity, he thought, had long abandoned shame in exchange for curiosity. He created an account. No name, no traceable email, no metadata. The profile picture was a black square. Under About, he typed a single line, Real, Unfiltered, Hidden Truths. He uploaded the clip, setting the title as Midnight Apartment, Anonymous Source. It took less than a minute to process. When the upload bar turned green, Richard leaned back in his chair. For a long time, he simply watched the screen, the small thumbnail now part of an endless grid of stranger secrets. It didn't feel like revenge yet. It felt like proof that he could take something that had broken him and control it, repurpose it, redefine it. He checked the page the next morning. Over 1,000 views. By evening, 10,000. No comments, just numbers climbing like a pulse. A strange calm settled in him. It wasn't pride, exactly, more like confirmation. He had turned betrayal into data, emotion into analytics. Each view, each click, was a measure of justice. That night, he prepared more clips. He blurred faces, cut sound, adjusted lighting. He made them almost beautiful, the kind of cold beauty born from distance. His hands moved with precision. He was no longer documenting his pain. He was curating it. At some point, Clara called from the other room.
Are you coming to bed?
Soon,
He said, not turning from the screen. Her voice sounded tired, guilty in a way only he could now recognize. He waited for her footsteps to fade, then pressed upload again. By the end of the week, 5 videos were online. Each one slightly different in tone, one framed through the mirror, another from the living room corner, another focused on gestures, not faces. They looked less like recordings and more like installations, a gallery of deceit disguised as art. The comments began appearing. Anonymous users describing the scenes, guessing stories behind them. Feels too real. Amazing composition. Whoever filmed this knows what they're doing. Richard read them all. Each sentence fed a darker satisfaction. He wasn't invisible anymore. Someone was watching his work now. He started tracking statistics, view counts, countries, time zones. He watched the map light up with tiny dots of attention. People from Europe, Asia, America, all consuming fragments of his broken marriage without ever knowing the truth behind them. It became a project of global scale, and yet, in his quiet house, it felt intimate, like whispering secrets into the dark. He renamed the folder Distribution to The Archive. It sounded grander, permanent. Each morning, he acted normal. Breakfast, small talk, weather reports. Each night, he became a curator of hidden lives. Sometimes, when editing, he noticed details he'd missed before. Clara's expression when the young man wasn't looking, a hesitation in her eyes, a flicker of guilt. He paused the frame, studying it. For a brief moment, pity surfaced. Then he erased it with a click. He wasn't her husband anymore. He was her editor. Days blurred together. Richard no longer counted time in hours but in uploads. Each file was a chapter, each title a quiet revenge. He gave them poetic names: Reflection Study, Echoes of Evening, Two Shadows. The artistry amused him. If the world could turn pain into entertainment, why shouldn't he? He had built his own mirror, one where morality dissolved into pixels. But then, one night, as he refreshed the page, he saw something that made his hand freeze. A message. Private. From an anonymous user. "I think I know the woman in these videos." Richard stared at the words. His throat went dry. For the first time in weeks, he felt fear, real, physical fear. He closed the browser, unplugged the drive, and sat in silence. The clock ticked loudly now. The air felt heavier. He walked to the kitchen, poured whiskey into a glass, drank it fast. The burn steadied him. He told himself it was a bluff. The internet was full of liars. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about it.
What if someone did recognize her?
What if Clara found out before he was ready for her to? He went to bed late. Clara was asleep, her breathing calm, unaware of the storm gathering behind the screen. Richard lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, the taste of whiskey still sharp on his tongue. And in the dark, one thought echoed again and again.
I crossed the line, but I can't go back.
At first, it was about control. By the third week, it was about obsession. Richard stopped keeping track of time. Days bled into nights, nights into endless edits. The house grew darker, quieter, as if absorbing his silence. The cameras still ran, always recording, always feeding him new material. He no longer waited for something to happen. He needed it to. Every ring of the front door, every vibration of Clara's phone became a pulse in his veins. When she left, he counted minutes. When she returned, he replayed the footage. He no longer felt jealousy, only curiosity. What will she say this time? Will he come back tonight? It wasn't love, not anymore. It was a study, a pattern, and Richard was its archivist. The folder, the archive, now contained hundreds of files, neatly labeled by date and timestamp. He'd even built a spreadsheet to track metrics, upload dates, view counts, retention times. He treated it like an experiment, his revenge disguised as research. The channel had grown fast. Tens of thousands of views became hundreds of thousands. The comments multiplied. Artful composition. Feels real. Pure emotion. Richard read each one like a drug. Every sentence validated his existence. Every click whispered you matter again. It wasn't about Clara anymore. She was just a vessel, a symbol of everything he'd lost, and everything he was taking back. He started skipping meals. His eyes burned from lack of sleep. The faint hum of the computer had replaced human voice in the house. Sometimes, at dawn, he'd catch his reflection in the monitor. Hollow cheeks, unshaven, eyes like a surveillance camera staring back. Still, he didn't stop. He began re-editing old footage, layering scenes, crossfading time itself. He turned weeks into seamless sequences, blending different nights into one endless repetition. The result looked abstract, more emotion than event. He titled it Cycle. It became one of his most watched uploads. Viewers speculated in the comments. Is this a metaphor for guilt? Whoever made this understands pain. Is this real or performance? He smiled reading that last one.
Both.
He whispered. Clara, meanwhile, sensed something changing in him. His eyes lingered too long. His smiles were mechanical. He'd stopped asking where she went. That silence frightened her more than accusation. Once, she touched his shoulder gently and asked,
Are you okay, Richard?
He looked at her, really looked, and realized how foreign her face had become.
I'm fine.
He said, but the words sounded hollow, automated. That night, when she left again, he didn't wait for her return. He turned on every monitor, every feed. The house on the screens seemed more alive than the real one around him. The footage started to replace memory. He began remembering her not as a person, but as pixels, moving shapes, gestures, patterns. His guilt, at first a shadow, now dissolved completely. He had crossed a moral horizon, and there was no way back. Sometimes he wondered if she suspected anything. Once, she walked into his study unexpectedly. The screens were black, but the drive was still connected. She smiled faintly.
Working late again?
He nodded, careful not to move too fast. She lingered a second longer than usual, then left. That night, Richard couldn't focus. He replayed her face in his mind, the small tremor in her voice, the hint of awareness in her eyes. Did she know? Did she feel the invisible gaze following her through every room? The next morning, she kissed him on the cheek as always, but he felt the stiffness in it. He realized then that she was watching him too now, quietly, cautiously. The balance had shifted. For the first time since it began, Richard felt cornered in his own house. Every sound became amplified. The door creaked, the hum of electricity, the faint whir of a hidden lens turning. He opened one of the live feeds. Clara was in the kitchen, making tea. She looked tired, older somehow. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at the window. Then she turned, not toward the kettle, but toward the camera's direction. It lasted less than 2 seconds. But it froze Richard's blood. Had she seen it? Or did she just sense it? He paused the feed, zoomed in. Her gaze was direct, unflinching, almost accusing. It was as if she knew she wasn't alone anymore. He closed the screen, heart pounding. That night, he couldn't edit, couldn't upload. He just sat in the dark, surrounded by silent machines, the same machines that had given him power, now making him feel trapped. For the first time in months, he turned the computer off. The house fell into complete silence. And in that silence, he realized something terrifying. He didn't know how to live without the screens anymore. The world outside the footage felt empty, slower, less real. He poured himself another drink, sat back, and whispered, "It's just data. Just files." But even he didn't believe it. The addiction wasn't to the videos. It was to being the one who watches. The truth didn't explode. It leaked, slowly, quietly, like a crack in glass spreading until the whole pane gives way. It started on an ordinary morning. Clara sat in a cafe near her work, scrolling through her phone. She was tired, distracted, her mind half on a client meeting, half on the dull ache that had settled between her and Richard. She wasn't looking for anything, just passing time. Then, an ad appeared. It was a still frame, blurry, tinted blue. Her heart skipped once. It looked familiar. She almost scrolled past it, but something, a shadow, a posture, made her stop. She tapped it. The video began to play. And there she was. For a second, she didn't understand what she was seeing. The room looked like theirs, but maybe it was coincidence. Then she saw the details, the same curtains, the same lamp, the same faint stain on the wall near the door. Her breath froze. She dropped the phone on the table. The screen kept playing, soundless, while her reflection in the black coffee trembled. She picked it up again, trembling. The description read, "Anonymous. Real footage. Hidden life." No names, no context, but she didn't need them. She knew every second of it. Clara's first reaction wasn't rage. It was disbelief.
How? Who could have?
Then her mind reached the only logical possibility.
Richard!
She left the cafe without finishing her coffee. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her keys trying to unlock the car. The drive home was a blur. Lights, traffic, heartbeat. When she entered the house, it felt smaller somehow. The silence was oppressive, heavy, watching her. Every corner, every wall, suddenly suspect. She walked slowly through the rooms, eyes scanning surfaces. The living room. The bookshelf. The smoke detector. And then she saw it, a tiny, almost invisible lens, hidden behind a decorative vase. Her breath turned shallow. She stepped back, eyes darting around, seeing new shapes in old furniture. Every object looked alive now, aware, observant. She ran to the study. The door was unlocked. The computer was still on. The screen glowed with open folders. Names. Dates. Thumbnails. Hundreds of them. At the top of the screen, the archive. She clicked. Dozens of videos appeared, neatly labeled, methodical. Her hands shook as she opened one. There was her own face, distorted by the lens, unaware, vulnerable. The camera had watched her laugh, talk, move, exist. It was as if someone had stolen not just her image, but her life. A sound behind her. She turned. Richard stood at the door, holding a mug of coffee. For a moment, they just looked at each other. He didn't speak. He didn't even look surprised. Clara's voice cracked.
What is this?
Richard's eyes were calm, almost distant.
You wanted to hide. I wanted to see.
You filmed me?
She couldn't finish the sentence. Words collapsed under disbelief.
I filmed truth. You lied. I watched.
You posted them.
It wasn't a question. He hesitated, just long enough to confirm it. Clara's hands clenched.
People saw me, the whole world.
They don't know who you are.
That's not the point. You knew.
Silence swallowed the room. Richard set the mug down, his face unreadable.
I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it to show you what you are.
What I am, you destroyed me.
He looked away, almost gently.
No, you destroyed us. I just documented it.
Her eyes filled with tears, not of guilt, but humiliation. The thought of strangers watching her life, dissecting it frame by frame, made her skin crawl. She didn't scream again. She simply turned, walked past him, and out the door. Richard didn't stop her. He just stood there, staring at the empty space where she'd been. The next morning, 2 detectives knocked on his door. They were polite but firm. They had questions about online videos, about consent, about the footage matching scenes inside his home. Richard didn't resist. He led them to the study, powered on the computer, opened the archive. As they scrolled through the files, he watched their faces, professional, detached. To them, it wasn't art. It wasn't justice. It was evidence. When they asked why he did it, he said simply,
Because I wanted the truth to be seen.
One detective replied.
Then you'll have your chance. In court.
They escorted him out. The house remained silent behind him, glowing faintly from the monitor still left on. On the screen, frozen mid-frame, Clara stood facing the camera, that same glance from the kitchen where she had finally seen. Now, everyone would. The first time they saw each other after his arrest was in the visiting room of the county detention center. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Everything was beige, sterile, designed to neutralize emotion. Between them, a pane of glass, a phone on each side. Clara hesitated before picking it up. Richard was already seated, motionless, his hands folded neatly on the table. For a long time, they just looked at each other. 26 years of marriage condensed into a silence too heavy for words. Clara spoke first. Her voice was soft, but steady.
Why?
Richard didn't answer right away. He studied her face, pale, sleepless, older somehow.
You wouldn't have believed me. If I told you what you were doing, you'd have lied again. But cameras don't lie.
You filmed my life. Then you gave it to strangers.
I gave it meaning. You think those people saw you? They didn't. They saw the truth of what betrayal looks like.
You don't get to turn pain into art, Richard. You don't get to make me your proof.
He looked away for the first time. His reflection in the glass stared back, faint and ghostly.
I didn't plan to destroy you, but when I watched, it changed me. Watching you with him, it wasn't jealousy anymore. It was like studying gravity. Once you understand how it works, you can't pretend you don't.
Don't you hear yourself? You're talking like this was science.
It was. You were the subject. I was the observer.
And what did you discover?
He looked at her, his gaze heavy with something that almost resembled regret.
That love can rot without anyone noticing. That even good people can turn monstrous if you give them the right reason.
Clara pressed the phone closer to her ear, as if trying to hold onto sanity through the static.
You had a choice. You could have left. You could have walked away.
I did. Just not physically.
She stared at him, this man she'd once shared everything with, now speaking as if emotions were numbers, as if cruelty could be justified by intellect. Her voice trembled.
You humiliated me in front of the world.
And you humiliated me in front of no one. That's worse.
For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt sharp, metallic. Then Clara's tone changed, colder, deliberate.
You think people pity you because you were hurt, but they don't. They see you for what you are now, a criminal. You broke the law, Richard. You broke me.
Maybe that's fair.
Fair?
You wanted freedom. I wanted truth. Neither of us knew what it would cost. Now we do.
You still think this is philosophy?
It's survival. When you took away my trust, you left me with nothing but observation. I needed to see. I needed something real.
What's real now? A courtroom? Headlines?
He smiled faintly, the saddest kind of smile.
Reality always comes late.
She stared at him, seeing no guilt, only exhaustion. A man stripped of emotion, reduced to logic and consequence. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence. Finally, she said,
They'll sentence you, Richard. You'll lose everything.
I already did.
Clara's hand trembled on the phone.
I hope you understand what you did to me.
Do you?
What do you mean?
You wanted to feel alive again, and I wanted to stop feeling dead. We both succeeded, just differently.
The words hit her like a slap. She hung up the phone, stood abruptly, but didn't leave right away. Through the glass, they locked eyes one final time. No hatred. No forgiveness. Just two people, trapped in the reflection of what they made of each other. As Clara turned to walk away, Richard pressed his palm against the glass. She didn't look back, but his gaze stayed on the glass, staring at the faint smudge her hand had left when she'd almost touched it. He whispered,
She finally saw me.
The courtroom was colder than he expected. Not in temperature, in tone. Everything felt procedural, stripped of meaning. The same fluorescent light, the same pale walls. Justice, he thought, had no texture, only paperwork. Richard sat beside his lawyer, his wrists free but his future already bound. Across the aisle sat Clara, her face composed, her eyes fixed on the floor. Between them, a silence more binding than any chain. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The ritual began. The charges were read slowly, almost mechanically. Violation of privacy. Non-consensual distribution of explicit material. Invasion of personal rights. Each word landed like a hammer, precise, impersonal, final. Richard didn't flinch. He listened the way a man listens to a post-mortem of his own life. The prosecutor presented the case with clinical detachment. Evidence was projected on the screen. Screenshots, upload logs, the infamous folder, the archive. Each file name sounded smaller now, stripped of the poetry he'd once given them. Reflection, study. Two shadows. Cycle. In the courtroom, they weren't art, they were crimes. When the prosecutor called Clara to the stand, Richard looked up for the first time. She walked with composure, though her hands trembled slightly as she took the oath. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady but brittle, like glass about to crack.
He filmed me without my consent. He shared those videos online. I didn't even know until someone sent me a link. My whole life was exposed.
Her voice faltered on that word, exposed. Richard watched her, and for the first time since his arrest, something inside him stirred. It wasn't guilt, not exactly. More like the recognition of what he'd broken. The prosecutor asked,
"Did you ever give him permission to record you?"
No.
She said, barely above a whisper.
"Did he ever attempt to apologize?"
Clara's eyes flicked toward him, briefly.
Not in a way that mattered.
The courtroom was silent. Even the hum of the lights seemed to pause. When it was his turn to speak, Richard rose slowly. He didn't look at the jury, only at the judge.
I don't deny what I did, but I want you to understand why. I wasn't trying to humiliate her. I was trying to understand what I'd become, what we had become.
The judge interrupted.
Mr. Lowell, this is not a therapy session. Stay on the facts.
He nodded.
The facts are simple. I recorded my wife. I published the videos. I was angry, but not for the reason you think. It wasn't lust or hate. It was emptiness. And emptiness needs to be filled with something.
The prosecutor cut in.
"And you filled it with her privacy."
Richard looked at her calmly.
Yes.
The words hung in the air, stark, honest, undeniable. He sat down. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the air out of the room. The rest of the trial blurred together. Technical testimonies, internet policies, digital evidence. Experts explained metadata, timestamps, IP addresses. To the world, it was a case study in modern ethics. To Richard, it was a eulogy. The defense tried to argue that the videos were anonymized, artistic, without identifying features. But the prosecutor showed still frames of their living room, their furniture, even a reflection of Clara's hand, all unmistakably real. When closing arguments began, the prosecutor's tone sharpened.
"This case isn't about art. It's about power. About a man who used technology not to seek truth, but to punish someone for not loving him the way he demanded. He turned intimacy into surveillance and trust into evidence."
Richard listened, motionless. Each sentence felt like an echo of what he already knew but had refused to say aloud. When the judge returned with the verdict, the world seemed to hold its breath.
Guilty on all counts.
The words didn't shock him. They sounded almost merciful in their simplicity. As the bailiff approached, Richard turned his head, just slightly, toward Clara. She didn't look at him, but he caught the faint movement of her lips. Maybe she was whispering finally. Maybe goodbye. He was led away quietly. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Do you regret it? Was it revenge? Do you have anything to say to your wife? He said nothing. In the van's small window, he saw his reflection, older, smaller, blurred by motion. For the first time, the watcher had become the watched. And somewhere, in the distance, the story he'd filmed had turned into one he could no longer control. Prison wasn't what he imagined. There were no iron bars, no shouting guards, no cinematic cruelty. Just a slow erosion, of time, of purpose, of self. Days blended into the same gray rhythm, the clang of the morning bell, the shuffle of boots on concrete, the low murmur of men who'd already given up. To Richard, it was almost comforting, a system built on predictability. Order. But even here, order couldn't hide the truth. Every night, when the lights dimmed, he saw the flicker of screens in his head. The glow of the monitor. The still frame of Clara's face. The reflection that once stared back at him, now replaced by his own in a metal mirror above the sink. He'd thought confinement would quiet his mind. Instead, it amplified it. The other inmates mostly ignored him. Some recognized his name from the headlines, engineer jailed for secret recordings. They'd whisper when he passed, smirk, sometimes nod in a way that wasn't friendly. To them, he wasn't dangerous. He was pathetic. A man undone by his own need to look. He spent hours in the prison library, reading anything that resembled analysis, psychology, philosophy, case studies on voyeurism and control. He wasn't searching for redemption, only explanation. One passage struck him. The observer believes he is separate from what he sees, until the act of observation changes him beyond recognition. He copied that line on a scrap of paper and taped it to the wall beside his bunk. It was, he thought, the closest thing to truth he'd ever read. Weeks passed. Then months. Letters arrived occasionally, from lawyers, from journalists seeking interviews, from people claiming to understand him. He answered none. But one day, an envelope without a return address arrived. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No words. Just a printed photograph. It was Clara, standing in sunlight, somewhere near the coast. No makeup, no anger, no fear. She looked real. For a long time, he stared at it. The wind had caught her hair mid-motion. The camera angle was imperfect, human. Someone else had taken it. Richard's chest tightened. She was living again. Outside his frame. Beyond his story. He placed the photo on the table, smoothed its edges carefully, then turned it face down. He couldn't look at it anymore. That night, during lights out, he dreamed he was back in their house. The cameras were gone. The walls were bare. But the silence remained. He walked through each room, calling her name. No answer. When he reached the mirror in the hallway, he stopped. In it, not his reflection, not hers, just a black screen, faintly glowing. He woke up shaking. The next morning, during roll call, a guard said, "You've got visitors." It wasn't Clara. It was a filmmaker, young, curious, holding a notebook. She'd read about his case and wanted to make a documentary on ethics and surveillance. He listened politely, but the irony was unbearable. Someone else now wanted to turn him into content. He declined.
I've already been filmed enough,
he said. That night, he wrote for the first time. A letter, addressed to no one.
I thought I wanted truth, but truth without mercy is just cruelty. I thought the camera showed reality. It only showed obsession. What I created wasn't art, it was a mirror. And the first thing I lost was the man looking into it.
He folded the paper, tucked it inside a book, and never sent it. Over time, even the guards stopped noticing him. He became another quiet figure among many. But inside, something subtle began to shift. The part of him that once sought control now sought stillness. He started helping in the prison workshop, repairing broken radios. Machines that listened, but didn't see. There was comfort in that. One day, during an inspection, a new warden passed by his cell.
Lowell, right? You're the camera guy.
Richard smiled faintly.
Was.
The warden nodded.
You keep your head down. You'll get parole in a few years.
Parole. Freedom. The word sounded foreign, almost abstract. He wasn't sure if he wanted it anymore. In the courtyard, when he looked up, he sometimes saw the glint of surveillance cameras mounted on the walls. He used to hate them. Now, he simply nodded at them, like old acquaintances. He had become what he once feared, the observed. But for the first time, he didn't resist it. Some nights, as he lay awake, he whispered quietly into the dark.
Someone's always watching. The question is, who deserves to be seen?
5 years later, Richard stepped out of the prison gates. No one waited for him. The world, he realized, doesn't pause for fallen men. It simply moves on, a tide indifferent to those it leaves behind. He carried a small box, 2 books, a folded letter, and a watch that no longer worked. The air outside felt too wide, too loud. The sunlight hurt his eyes, real light, not the artificial glow of lamps or monitors. He stood still for a long moment, uncertain of where to go. He rented a room above a small hardware store in a quiet town. The owner, an elderly man, asked no questions. He simply gave him the key and said, "Pay weekly, keep it quiet." Silence, that he could do. For months, he lived like a shadow. Mornings spent walking empty streets, evenings repairing broken radios for neighbors, just as he had in prison. He liked machines that only listened. They never betrayed. He stayed offline. No computer, no phone. The internet had become a myth, something he no longer trusted. Sometimes, when he passed a shop window, he saw screens showing news, endless feeds of faces, influencers, scandals. The world had moved on to new obsessions. No one remembered the archive. But he did. Every night, before bed, he sat by the small window, watching the streetlights flicker. In the reflection, he saw an old man with tired eyes. He no longer looked like the observer he once was. He looked like what he had always tried to avoid, human. One afternoon, a letter arrived. The handwriting was familiar. He opened it carefully.
Richard, I don't hate you anymore. Hate is just another way of holding on. I've moved away. I work at a shelter now. It helps. I wanted to tell you that the world did forget, but I didn't. Not entirely. I hope you find peace, even if it's not forgiveness. Clara.
He read it twice, then folded it slowly and placed it back into the envelope. He didn't cry, but something inside him loosened, a tension that had lived beneath his ribs for years. That night, he dreamed again of the mirror in their old house. This time, the reflection was different. No camera. No faces. Just a window, open to the morning. He woke before dawn, sat by the real window, and watched the first light spill across the quiet street. The world outside was imperfect, Cracked pavement, flickering neon, a stray dog sniffing through trash, but it was real. Unfiltered. And for the first time, Richard realized he didn't need to capture it. He could just see it. He picked up the broken watch from his box, turned it in his hands. The second hand was stuck between 11 and 12, forever on the edge of tomorrow. He smiled. In the distance, a camera on a street pole rotated slightly, scanning the road. He looked at it and whispered, almost kindly,
Keep watching. Someone should.
Then he stood up, put on his coat, and stepped outside, into the moving world that had already forgiven him by forgetting.